Welcome to the Tribe of Testimonies. Here you will find conversations with faithful Native American members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sharing their stories and their love of the Savior. My name's Andrea Hales. I'm Navajo, and I'm glad that you've decided to come and join us today. I am on the line today with my new friend, Ira Jones. He emailed me recently, and I responded and said, hey, you want to be a guest? And so here we are. Ira, would you please introduce yourself in your tribal way as much as possible? If it's in your language, great. If it's not, that's fine. Not everybody speaks their language, and some languages are dead.
I'm not real fluent in our language, but I do know a few of our greetings. And so one of the greetings that we have is Yahweh Scano, and pretty much is translated into English. It's kind of just like I'm thankful that you're well, and that's pretty much the beginning of that. But yeah, I'm not really. I don't have a whole lot of language experience, but I have a lot of friends that are, and I kind of share stuff on occasion. I kind of try to make sure I listen and try to learn as much as I can.
Cool. And which tribe are you?
I'm a Cattaraugus Seneca. We're from just a little bit south of Buffalo, New York. And there's three different territories. So there's a territory like around North Niagara Falls area. And then that's the Tonawanda Res. And then there's the Cattaraugus Res, which is a little bit south of Buffalo. And then south of us is another territory, and that's the Allegheny. And so I'm from the Cattaraugus, though. There's three of us.
I actually did not know that, so thank you for telling me that. I learned so much from all my guests, so thank you.
Yeah. So we're all Haudenosaunee, and we're all Six Nations, but because of the things that kind of happened to us, we kind of got split up into three different. And there's actually one in Oklahoma that I just learned about not a few years back too. There was a band of Senecas that left New York, and when they got where they were going, they ended up in Oklahoma. So there's actually a band of Senecas down there too.
Interesting.
So that's a little interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what is something that you love about your heritage as it relates to the gospel of Jesus Christ? It could be pretty much anything: a story, celebration, a way of life, a ceremony. What do you love about your heritage as it relates to the gospel?
There's a few things. I mean, I run into stuff all the time, kind of. So as I've been growing up, as I grew up here in the res or on the territory, we were probably, us and a couple other families probably were the only families that were LDS. And so my experience with my culture and trying to mend those two together, LDS and the culture, trying to mend those two things together has been a real big struggle for me. And I was a little bit lost, if you want to kind of like maybe a person without a country kind of a thing. So I never really linked myself up culturally because I didn't participate a lot in that. But also being a little bit more in the LDS and kind of growing up in that culture, it's been a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out what those two things have in common, because I come from a place where the church kind of, its establishment took place right here in Seneca territory. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I for a long time I kind of tried to figure out how those two things kind of worked together. And just in the last probably 10, 15 years, I've kind of put some things together. And the one thing I want to share is that I feel like that it says in the Book of Mormon that the Lamanites will be saved or will be preserved for a later thing, And I feel like the one thing that we were able to contribute was our knowledge of peace and how we established that among uh, 5 nations originally, and then later in the 1700s, the Tuscaroras came up from the Carolinas, and they also joined us, and so that then we became the 6 nations. Having that knowledge of the 6 nations and having my knowledge of the LDS, it's been I've been just trying to mend those things together, and it's just been really eye-opening culturally with the ceremonies in the Longhouse, and then the ceremonies with the LDS, even in Temple. Try not to in Temple, is that they're really similar. They're very, very close. I'll give you a couple, just so maybe I can give you an example. And you may recognize some of these. And so when you go into Longhouse, which is basically like an Indian church, it's a building now, but I don't think it was originally in a building. I think it was just their dwellings were actually, the places that they went were everything to them. It was their way of life, their family, their culture, their religion, if you want to call it that. But one of the things that kind of drew me to trying to understand and mend these two things together was that in Longhouse, the men have a door and the women have a door, and they enter through those doors and they actually sit on separate ends of the room in separate areas. They don't just come in together and blend together. And when you get into those different ceremonies, there's also like you actually, when you're young, you actually receive a name, and that name is only to be used in the Longhouse. And then later on down the road, when you become a little bit older, and then you eventually pass, that name is actually taken from you and given back, and so that they can reuse it again. There's a couple more other things. There's, for instance, there's a while back, I can remember when I got real active in the church, because I wasn't always real active. But as I got reactivated in the church a little bit, I actually went to a live session in the Salt Lake Temple, and that was an experience, because it also kind of relates to, in the Longhouse, they actually use 3 speakers, and they go over the whole creation. They go over all, all the good and evil stuff that happened and how we came about, And so when I went to the live session in Salt Lake, it was really eye-opening. Like, I've been here before. I've seen this before. So there's a couple other things, too, that kind of relate to all that. I'm kind of a big government guy too. I've been doing this thing about proper government and trying to learn what that really means. And I feel like the Haudenosaunee and the Iroquois Confederacy or whatever, we've been able to live by that. And there's a couple of different, for the Haudenosaunee, we don't have a written language, and so we rely heavily on oral history. And so oral history, part of the government that was established by the peacemaker. Okay, the peacemaker. This is a whole different story now. I kind of feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but so the peacemaker comes, right, and he comes on this white boat, this boat made out of stone, and he comes into a guy named, his name is Hiawatha, and so Hiawatha is one of his disciples, it says, basically, and it basically they go and they try to establish this peace, or this agreement to not kill, not to murder, and so there's this belt that he brings and he makes, and there's these beads that they made. He made them out of wampum, which is it's a seashell. It's called a quahog's shell, and they make these beads, and he asks them to eventually, when he gets them all to agree to this great peace, he gets them to make these beads, and then he weaves into this belt this image, and the image is in the center. There's a tree, and then it has a horizontal bar, and then there's a 4-sided box, and then a horizontal bar again connecting each other, and then there's another set of boxes on the outside of that. And then on the outside of those outside boxes, there's also another horizontal bar. When he is establishing the peace among the people, he got the boxes represent a nation, okay, and that tree actually represents the peacemaker, or in this instance, it's the governmentally represents the Onondagas who live in Syracuse, New York. Okay, so they're the center fire, and so they're the center. Anytime we have a grand council, we all come together. We come to Syracuse to have this whatever this council, this meeting, and so they're represented by the tree. And then the next two boxes next to them is on the left side would be the Cayugas, and on their right side would be the Oneidas. And then they got the horizontal bar connecting the next two, and the next ones, that's where I come from, is the Senecas. And we're the keepers of the western door. And the Mohawks are on the right side, and they're keepers of the eastern door. So anytime there was an invasion or something was going on, we were the ones that kind of took the brunt of it. And then we would send back messengers or somebody to come back and get like support. So that's why they're calling us the keepers. We were trying to guard that. But so originally, when the peacemaker finally went and was able to talk to all five of these nations, the only ones that didn't agree at first was the Onondagas. And so you had the two groups on the right and the two groups on the left. And so there was this big space in the middle where the Onondagas were, and they weren't agreeing to the peace part. And so it was kind of a big game changer, because how do you get these people to agree to peace, and how do you get these people to agree to peace when right in the middle there's this conflict? You know what I mean? There's this war. It'd be impossible to do, because he's making war with both sides. The guy that really didn't agree, and who kind of in charge of the Onondagas, his name was Taradaho. Taradaho is now it's a title, but at the time it was a real person, and he wasn't agreeable to what they were, proposing. And so what they did was to try to help him and kind of see the good in it. Basically, went to go talk to this woman, and this woman is represented by a corn. Right? She's represented by corn or life, because corn gives life. And so they say she comes from a plant or something living like that. And her name was Jagonsase. And Jagonsase, they kind of got her to come help. And so they acquired her talents. And then they went and approached Taradaho again. And when they approached Taradaho this time, after she was able to orate what this whole thing was about, he agreed to it after a while. And one of the cool things that I really like about and this is kind of where I'm trying to bring everything into it. The one cool thing that I really like about what she did was the legend goes that she actually combed the snakes out of his hair. He was a really like fierce looking dude. He had these snakes and his hair was all over the place. He was a mess. You know what I mean? He was just really like totally evil, And so as she was talking to him and got him to calm down and kind of comforted some of his thoughts, they said she was able to like comb some of the snakes out of his hair and kind of like, if you want to put it this way, kind of like civilize him to be able to see greater things, And so one of the cool things that I like about how the gospel relates to heritage is that I don't think people really understand the role of a woman. And I'm beginning to think that even women don't understand the role of a woman and how super important it is for them. You know what I mean? And for them to realize what it is, and also to actually to do it, to help it. So what I'll put it this way. My wife, Samantha, right? She's probably the best person that I know. And I think her understanding of the role of woman is really, really, I think she understands it really well. And I guess I got to do a little bit of a sidebar again, because Samantha never grew on territory. Her mom, she kind of grew up, and She always tells me she's like a kind of a gypsy. You know what I mean? Because her mom was just constantly moving all over the country, and so she had went to like I don't know, I forget the number exactly right now, but it's like 35 different schools in her whole like growing up. She graduated. I don't know. She went to 5 high schools right at the end. It was really chaotic for her, but she understood that. She understands that, and I think that that role of a woman is kind of like innately embedded into each of the females, the female uh, gender, and I'm grateful Samantha has been able to understand that and kind of comb the snakes out of my hair, kind of so to speak, if that kind of draws a picture. Because I feel like the gospel of Jesus Christ has helped me to like kind of along with my culture, kind of help me to civilize myself and kind of get me to not be as bad or evil and help me to grow up a little bit and realize that it's not all about me. It's about, I mean, it kind of a little bit is, but it's also about the people that are around me. And then, of course, you start to have a family. Of course, it's about your children now, too. And she's just been a great role in helping me to see, as Jagosa say, was combing the snakes out of Dao's hair. That's how I feel that Samantha was for me and helped me to like get me to calm down and to look at things differently. And so there's a lot more, I guess, but that's the main thing. I think that I feel like the church and the my culture have kind of blended together a little bit and to help me to realize, not to be selfish and to have a think down the road and think of your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids and kind of that kind of a thought process.
Wow, thank you. You sent me a link to a PBS video about mostly about that story. So you were also telling me about how you were excited about the eclipse that's coming and it's going to pass right over where you live, yeah?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you're really excited about it to witness it, and the Navajo way is don't look at it at all. So tell me,
oh, really?
Yeah, tell me about what you guys, I don't know even who you guys, in quotations, who you guys are that's doing this. I would like to hear what you're doing.
Okay, so a while back, uh, well, in my family, we talk about stuff, and it's not always just LDS or just culturally. And we kind of brainstorm. We talk about this stuff a lot, like around a dinner table or whatever. Whenever we get together, our kids always like know that they're going to take off because the uncles and stuff. We're all going to get into this conversation. We start talking about this very thing that we're talking about. It's kind of boring for them, and they don't mind it for a few minutes, but then we could go on for hours talking about this type of stuff. I think we learned from my uncles and my dad. They would do the same thing. We would talk about this type of stuff. So the thing that I sent you, the video that I sent you, I started having this brainstorm. I'm like, man, there's got to be something to this eclipse. I don't quite understand it just yet, but I wanna. And this is about a year ago because I knew the eclipse was coming. But then as I started to watch that video, see when the peacemaker comes and he starts to he gathers Hiawatha to come and be one of his first disciples and to get this message of this is the good news, okay? This is the great news, the great peace, the great peace. When they finally establish all of this, Jagonte finally gets the snakes out of Tadadaho's hair and he finally joins. Well, he is then crowned. She crowns him with a headdress where it has antlers on it and feathers and stuff. And he becomes the chief of chiefs. Okay. And so as a ceremonial part of that and having some kind of a thing to like mark that event, it was actually done under an eclipse. Okay. So what they did was the piece was then they took a white pine, okay, and they dug a great big hole, and their evidence or their let me say, how do I put that? Their
Symbol,
the way they demonstrated Yeah, they're symbolic. Yeah, there you go. They're symbolic demonstration of them wanting to hold this piece together. Is they actually took their physical weapons and they put them in the ground. They buried them, and then they took that white pine and they put it on top, and then it grew. It roots grew right around the weapons, and so all that whole event took place during the eclipse, and that's why I think the eclipse is a good thing. Now it may mark. I've been kind of doing a little more studying on it, and it may mark some other maybe some negative stuff with it too. But I mean, I do think it's an event. I think uh, uh, that's kind of for me. It kind of connects the dots a little bit. Also, I feel like it would be a chance for us to recommit
Mm-hmm.
to the Creator or the Savior or God or whoever whoever your dude is, whoever your guy is. So I've asked and I've invited a lot of people to come to this event right here at my house, and that's what I'm going to do. And instead of burying physical weapons, though, because I don't feel like we actually have an issue anymore, I feel like there's a deeper thing that comes within us now. Each individual, we're fighting this battle internally. It's really, it's kind of tearing us apart, really. And so my whole scheme of things was to get people to put in writing on paper those things that hold you back from knowing the Creator or knowing God, and not to just not know about Him. It's one thing to know about Him, that's kind of cool, but I wanted to put in writing on paper those things that actually hold you back from knowing Him. Is the kind of that I kind of used in my invitation to come. So I've invited a lot of people. I've spent 32 years of my life down in Philadelphia because that's where I worked for a lot of years, and so I invited a lot of those people that I had made friends with down there. I invited a lot of course, my cousins. My dad comes from a family of 13. His mom had 13 kids. Well, she actually had 15, but 13 living kids. So I got lots of cousins, and any one of those cousins that I have numbers for, I've all sent out invitations for them. And of course, my daughter lives in Arizona, and so I sent an invitation to her. My other daughter still lives in Philadelphia. My two sons live here. I've been just invited. I didn't really care after a while. After I got the idea in my head, I just thought it would be a good thing to try to bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try to draw lines of parallel instead of lines that kind of collide with different cultures, and that includes the LDS and the culture, especially here on territory, because we actually have. I mean, we're one of. I mean, I know the Navajos have a couple of buildings, LDS buildings on theirs, but in the East, we're probably the only one that has a building on territory, an LDS chapel. And so there's always been a little bit of a conflict because of some of the things that kind of transpired over the years with, the different schoolings and stuff that happened. And I just feel like it's important for people to draw lines of parallel instead of what our differences are and not focus on that so much. So that's kind of what we did with that. That's my idea with the eclipse, is that if it was good enough for them to do that, demonstrate that peace under an eclipse, I figured it was good enough for us to recommit to God or the Creator somehow to be better and to do better. And so that was the whole idea behind that whole thing.
Have you invited the tribal leaders of the nations on the wampum belt? The Mohawk,
I have not. I mean, I know a couple of chiefs. One of the chiefs that I kind of knew a while back, he passed away. I don't know them enough to invite them. I mean, I guess maybe that would have been a good thought, but I've invited a lot of friends from here. There's one guy that I grew up with his son, and so he's been a good friend to me. And like I've had traditional questions, and I always call him to like try to confirm or deny or help me to resolve a thought that I had culturally. And so I invited him, but he's actually going to be in Florida at the time. And it just kind of was like, just keep doing what you're doing. He's like, don't worry about who comes and who don't. He goes, I think it's a great idea. Just do what you got to do. He goes, I wish I could come, but we had already planned this trip taking with his family to Florida. So And I just invited all my friends, and like I said, it kind of would have been cool, but I just did. I don't have some of that relationship.
You still have time. So I think if I remember right though, this eclipse goes over like 4 different Palmyras, doesn't it?
Um,
I,
what do you
I
mean by that? 4 different.
I think there's like Palmyras in different states, and one is in New York that it's
Oh
going
yeah,
straight over, and 3 others. And I think one of
yeah.
the last one went over 4 different Salems.
Oh yeah, I did hear about that. Now that you say that, but it's kind of interesting this whole thing. I mean, I'm not going to get all spooky or anything. I don't know. You know what I mean? All I do know is that there was the eclipse in 2017, and that was the one you're talking about that crossed over a few of the Salems,
Yeah.
and then this one is crossed over. So, I mean, if you want to go according to, movies and stuff, yeah, one of my favorite actors is Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones because, I have that last name, but uh, he always says X never marks the spot. If you take a look at where the 17 eclipse comes across, and then now this one comes across, it's kind of in a unique, at least according to LDS culture, it's kind of crosses over in a unique area in Missouri. So that's
Yeah,
kind of cool.
it is pretty cool. I've we've looked at that and thought, man, that would be so cool to be able to witness that. Yeah. So you kind of mentioned in passing that you haven't always been active as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Would you be willing to share what brought you back into full activity?
As a child, I grew up in the church, got baptized. I think we lived in Utah at the time when I got baptized. We lived there in Orem somewhere. I think it was North Orem somewhere. But was baptized at 8 and did all the regular, things, 12 and the priesthood and those things. So ended up moving back home and, you know, life deals different cards to different folks. And so I think what happened was when it kind of all started when my mom and dad kind of got a divorce. And so that was a hard thing for our family. It was pretty, it was pretty hard for all of us, in our own ways too, collectively and individuals in the family. But I think there was some doubt that kind of got, brought in because of that whole situation. And I kind of just figured, well, I mean, I'm just going to try to figure this thing out. I'm going to go do my own thing. Well, doing my own thing wasn't exactly, didn't agree with, wasn't in line with the standards of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left the church for a little while. I mean, uh, left the church for quite a few years. I think by the time I left, I think it was around, I was 15 or 16 when I finally said, I'm going to just go concentrate on myself and try to figure this thing out. And so I did that for uh, I'd say about 12 years. About 12 years. And so by then, though, I had gotten married. I had already had 2 kids previous to the marriage. And so by the time I got married, we ended up moving to Philadelphia. And that's where I started my career. We actually got a knock on the door. Well, let me put this to Samantha had just joined the church too. She's a convert. So she had just joined the church like maybe a year before we moved to Philadelphia. And so when we moved, we kind of just said, I was going back and forth from here to there. It's like a 6.5 one-way trip. And so I would do that every weekend. But that was when I was young. When I got older, I was like, nah, I'm just getting a little too old for that. I don't think I can do that anymore. So I talked to Samantha and I said, listen, I want to move down. And she thought I was going to move her right to the middle of Philadelphia, maybe the one of the not so good sections of Philadelphia. I was like, no, we're gonna move. I want you to come down and visit, and so we can kind of figure out where you want to. I want you to move down, but I want you to be comfortable too. So she came down and we did our thing, and eventually, what happened was the missionaries re-knocked on our door, and so we really weren't super active, even when we went to Philadelphia. Even though she was freshly baptized, And so she had gotten the missionaries tracked into us again. And of course, and we already tell them, we're still members. We just real active. And they said, well, what do we got to do to get you to be active? And so it did that whole thing. So we just started kind of going back to church. And one of the things that I remember that kind of got us really going and getting kind of heavy back into church was that um, we were, I, I thought I made a pretty good living. You know what I mean? I thought I brought enough money into the situation where we could live pretty well. But Samantha was she kind of was in charge of the finance. Of course, I dumped all the money into the account, and then she would pay the bills. Right? She was kind of really in charge of the finances for the family, and she was just saying, "Man, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. We might have to move back because we just don't have enough money." And I'm like, so here we go again. Here's church stuff, right? When you get taught something when you're young, you always revert back to it, right? So I was like, okay, pay your tithing. And my wife just looked at me, and at the time, she's kind of still in the church, and she was just like, "What? Pay my tithing?" She goes, we don't have enough money as it is to do what we're doing now, and now you want me to add that concept on top of that. And so I said, yeah, just start paying your tithing, and I'm still kind of not full into the church. I'm kind of still floating around in that kind of area. And so she just started paying tithing, and things from there really. I think that was the time for me anyway, we really started to make that pivot. Having two kids too kind of helps. Their spirits and their the way they think is really pure and kind of precious, really. And so they would, I would come home in a condition probably not really adequate for a family, but I would come home and my daughter would mention a few things to me and say stuff to me that was just like, wow. I was like, where did that come from? And how was she even able to know a few of these things? You know what I mean? And so I started to make this, internal change and started to figure out, you know what? If I want a good family and if I want all this good stuff for them, it's got to start with me. I got to start to make the change first, and so they can have, hopefully a better life, and they won't be surrounded by things like that. And I really wanted to keep them from that, and so that's one of the things on top of the tithing thing. That really was, I think, is our pivot point. When we started to pay our tithing, things we were heavily blessed. Just put it that way. That's kind of how I got back into the church as far as that goes. And of course, over time now it's, I've served in a branch presidency and built elders quorum president a few times and served as a counselor and this and that, and been with the young. That was a really cool growing experience, being involved with the young men and stuff. Of course, there's been over the time now. There's been a lot of changes, how that operates still, but it was that's kind of how I got kind of reactivated into church.
I love that story. I think it's so. I think there are many people out there who are looking for answers, and I think sometimes the answers have to be tested before the answer actually comes. Like you had to test tithing before you actually knew that it was a commandment with the promise and that it was the right thing.
Yeah, my brother just recently shared a story about my dad, him having a conversation, and that conversation was about me, which I didn't know until just like maybe a year ago or so. But he basically just shared with my brother that when I was a kid, my dad would know that I could put my tithing away and I could hold on to it for a really long time and then pay it. and said that that type of faith is what's gonna, which probably is what was the main thing that got me back in the church. Ira could just, as a kid, he could just really like, most kids, they would find a way to, it would burn holes in your pockets, all that little bit of money or whatever, because you thought you were rich, you know what I mean? As a kid, you had all that dough, and you would find candies to spend it on or whatever. And he said about me, which I thought was pretty cool. My dad, kind of a compliment, really, but I just thought it was cool that he noticed that I was able to do that. And that later on, when he saw me again, because I think what happened was he was able to relay that experience with my wife. I think she gave a talk one time in front of him. She relayed the story of how we were paying our tithing, but he basically contributed my faith as to having that faith to do that principle is really what got me back into church. And he shared a scripture, but it's kind of escaping me right now. But it has something to do with being able to not be selfish in such a way that you would deny or not depart from the things that you earned. You know what I mean? And kind of you were able to give and contribute and help people with it. So I forget and I'd have to look up the scripture. But I thought that was a cool story. My dad, you know what I mean? I don't know if my dad ever he had ways to like indicate to you that he loved you without saying I love you. I don't know if you can kind of relate to that. My dad wasn't a big I love you kind of guy. He just didn't. Some people are, which is cool. But my dad was never like that. He would do things and say things or make other demonstrations of his love for you, which I thought was cool. And I kind of notice him now more that he's gone. It's cool, pretty cool.
You said you have a bunch of brothers. How many of you, and do you have sisters?
I have 5 brothers and 1 sister. So I have 5 older brothers. I'm the baby, and then we have a baby sister. Yeah, so we have a baby sister too.
How many of you live on or near the reservation? Like, how many of you live close to each other?
All but 2. One lives in North Carolina. I live in Heber, Utah.
That's awesome.
We're all pretty much here.
Yeah, that's so cool that you can be together so much.
Yeah.
Ira, it actually has been so great. I know you were worried about some of the things that I might ask you, but you have been just so full of the spirit and truth, and I really appreciate that. I do have one final question. What does it mean to you to know that you belong to the tribe of Israel?
Interesting question. I guess the one thing that could probably sum up the feeling that I have is that God really isn't a respecter of persons, meaning he don't look at your skin color, he doesn't look at your culture, he doesn't look at any of that. I think that's a characteristic that is really scarce among the human race. One of the things that I kind of hang on is that, no matter who we are or where we come from, he cares about us as individuals, and he doesn't almost like he doesn't really even care what we've done in the past. He's so willing to like just forgive us, and I just think it's a really cool thing to know that he wants our heart. He wants that really first. He wants us to come unto him, and he wants our hearts. He wants that to be the thing that drives us towards him. And I've learned over time that, uh, and I haven't always been this way, but I've learned over time that, you know, no matter where we come from, what culture, I've come to the thing that uh, I'm a child of God first, and all this other stuff comes to that. It, no matter how unique it is, how cool it is, you know, is that he requires quite a bit from us, but at the same time, it's for our own good. And unless we kind of entertain that a little bit and try to see what he sees in us, then I feel like we won't get it. We won't get the we won't get the true meaning. So I just feel like he says if we're not one, we're not his, and so how do we do that? It's kind of difficult. That's even a difficult thing. Even this thing I'm doing with the eclipse, I've invited. It's not just native people. I invited a whole bunch of just whoever. I had this guy approach me at work just the other day. And he this was kind of a cool situation, but so I build bridges for a living. I'm an ironworker, right? So I went to Detroit to build the bridge that goes into Canada. And so one day during lunch, I'm parked underneath the bridge because it was kind of warm out at the time. And this car pulls up, and this black fella gets out, and he goes, "Hey, you got a minute?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" So he says, "I'm just wondering about this bridge," and he had a few questions about the bridge, and I was trying to do my best to answer him. I says, "I don't know if I'm the correct guy to come ask about that," but I said, "So here's what I know," and I told him, and he says, "Man, I just feel like there's this thing happening, like in the Detroit area," and he just happens to be a preacher, a pastor at a local church, and he says, "I just feel like there's this change going to happen, like we're getting something out of this, like something's happening." And I said, "Yeah, I think so too." And so that video I shared with you, I shared with him, and he was just like jaw dropping. He was like, "Man, that is so good." And so I've even invited him to this thing. You know what I mean? I tried to be one of those people that I'm not a respecter of persons. I don't care who you. I just invited whoever I could and whoever I had my phone, and so I just feel like God just wants us. He just wants us to be one. You know what I mean? How do we do that? Even in the church, it's difficult with all the political stuff that's going on lately. It's just hard to be one. And I realized that the political things that's going on in the church it's not helping too much.
Yeah.
And it don't help even here on the res. You know what I mean? Because we have a political system. It's not a traditional system. It's an elective system. But we still, there's a lot of traditional folks that say that's not a good thing. And so all these things kind of divide us. And so one thing that I love and is really cool about the gospel of Jesus Christ and my culture is it just works on the individual. You know what I mean? There's like give proper respect and try to be as good as you can, have some form of righteousness and be, give proper respect to people and what they think and how they operate, because we all have an opportunity to learn, and kind of to grow. And we all do that at different levels and paces. And so I just feel like, I love how God's been just trying to draw us close to and be one human family, or really all brothers and sisters, until a lot of us realize that, then we'll continue to struggle through this life. And I think this eclipse has a cool, unique opportunity to kind of bring us together. And that's really that's just another one of those things I was trying to do with this. And, and I'm not nobody, you know what I mean? I just saw some kind of a parallel there. And I just wanted to kind of, take advantage of that and have people, come and, get a bigger picture of, being one, and so that's my answer to that, I guess.
Yeah. I love that answer. Thank you so much, Ira. This has been, I have been so uplifted, and it's so good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This weekend, my sister came up and we had a girls' day on Saturday. But before that, she was here Friday night, and my family wasn't the most well-behaved. We had a couple fits, a couple explosions. Perhaps there was yelling. I'm not proud of it. But my sister, she said maybe we should cast that bad spirit out. She said that there was a bad spirit in our home. And she's right. And we didn't do it right away. We should have done it right away. But that night when my little 6-year-old said our family prayer, she said the most sincere prayer and asked that we would stop feeling bad and that Jesus would come into our hearts. That's perfect. I'm really grateful for that little prayer that she offered for our family. I would like bad feelings to leave my heart and to have Jesus come into my heart. Obviously, he can't physically come into my heart, but he can mend my heart, fix my heart. And he really can. That's his gift to us. This past weekend was Easter, and it was so awesome to see how many people were bearing witness on social media about Easter and our Savior Jesus Christ. It was really awesome. It definitely brought Jesus to my heart. And I hope you saw that this weekend too. And I hope that whenever you have bad feelings, you seek to ask Heavenly Father to send the bad spirit away and to invite Jesus into your heart. And I hope you have a super wonderful, awesome day. Tribe of Testimonies is not sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The music is a traditional hymn, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing, arranged and performed by Kyle Forsyth. I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear how this podcast is affecting you. And I'm always looking for guests. If you or someone you know would be a great guest, you can reach me at tribeoftestimonies@gmail.com.